Hello and a very warm welcome to the Property and Investor podcast. I am your host, Paul Lanfear, and this is the podcast where we speak to some of the most interesting, inspiring and resilient people in property investing and beyond. And today is absolutely no exception. So this is a very special sort of mini series of the podcast called the Inner Circle All Stars. And this is a podcast with people that I have had the very great privilege of working with as part of my Inner Circle mentoring group. And today is absolutely no exception. It gives me genuine delight to introduce Josh Jackson to the podcast. How are you doing, Josh?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thanks for having me, Paul.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on the podcast. The format is not always the same, so we'll just sort of kick off. Give us the kind of what I call the 60-second CV. So you've got a really interesting background. I think people will be very keen to hear. So tell us, your business, but also your background, your road into property, and maybe perhaps some of the things that you've done in property.
Yeah, so originally started off and went to uni and did real estate management, and became a chartered surveyor, and graduated in not such a great time in 2008 when the world was falling apart, although not more recently, it's fallen apart again. And ended up becoming an estate agent. And I worked down in London for sort of circa 10 years, doing sales, lettings, property management. And over that time, I built up a small portfolio of rental flats, and realized pretty quickly that actually my sort of hobby and side hustle was doing better than really my day job. So a couple of years ago, decided to bite the bullet. Left that sort of security and set up a company called Bright Hill, which between myself and my business partner, now sort of securing projects to develop and build out flats.
And I mean, obviously, it sounds like you entered the workplace as like kind of one of those critical kind of worst case periods, wasn't it? Like in the financial crisis, which can't have been particularly thrilling. But you obviously went into sort of real estate. I mean, I suppose one of the interesting things that I would be keen to know is like what things have you taken forward from being an estate agent and obviously working in property management as well, that kind of you apply in the current day? What things have sort of helped you in that respect?
Yeah, I think it's been really important. I mean, ironically, when I first became an estate agent, it's not something I wanted to do. Having sort of trained and qualified as a surveyor, I sort of almost felt it was a bit below me, but I needed a job. I didn't do as well at uni as I thought, as perhaps I could have done, and fell into it and thought I'd be there for 6 months, and actually ended up loving it, and as I say, was in the profession for sort of 10 years. But I think what it really taught me is what people look for, and also how people have very little, from a residential point of view, have very little imagination, and you really have to sort of spell it out, and kind of from a marketing point of view, stage your home and set everything out, because people have no imagination, even to the extent of changing the color on the wall. And I think that for me has been really interesting, and certainly I also in the resi world, is people tend to, in economics, they always talked about the economic man, the man on the street, the rational human being. And when people are talking about their homes, not investments, but their homes, that person goes out the window. And then you really are dealing with very unreasonable people. And my job as an agent was to bridge that gap quite often between a seller and a buyer, between the two. And I found that really quite interesting, if not frustrating at times. Because if you took them in business, they would have a very different attitude to everything. But for me, I think that's where, you can capitalize, when you're repurposing buildings and things like that, is, almost leverage that to, my advantage.
And what I've noticed as well, in having kind of seen you in action, seen you looking at projects, having seen you discussing projects with people, is that, your background having qualified as a chart surveyor, I think does give you like a head and shoulders advantage when you're looking at projects. I notice that you talk about projects and you analyze projects, at a very, please take this as the compliment it's intended to be. It's a very sophisticated level. Like, you understand how to, for example, value a building if there's not a direct comparable next door. Would you agree with those sentiments?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've sort of flagged it sometimes. I think it's one of those things you don't realise what you're doing or what you're capable of doing, and then it's only when somebody asks you a question, you just suddenly all this sort of information comes out, and you're a bit sort of like, I'm not sure where that came from, actually. And I found that, even when I was training, guys coming into the business, when I was an estate agent, somebody asks you a question, sort of fresh faced or whatever, and you just sort of reel off this wealth of info, and you're a bit sort of catch yourself off guard, thinking, oh, actually, I do kind of know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely say that, and I have definitely seen that in action as well. So, as to like the program, so tell us a little bit about where you were when you started the program, because I mean, you're not, certainly you weren't completely new to property. I mean, you'd been in the business for some time. So, give us a bit of a snapshot about where you were before you started the program.
Yeah, so had just sort of set up the company in its current sort of format with my business partner, and we had just secured our first commercial to resi conversion, and there's having never sort of set up I don't want to say proper company, but in the past when I've been involved with my own companies, there's it's just been myself, and it's sort of all been internal sort of workings, with my buy-to-let portfolio. So to bring a brand new company to the market, there was a lot of work to be done with registering for VAT and Companies House, setting up letters, setting up emails, and all of this stuff that you don't really think about. So at that stage, we'd just sort of gone through that process, and we're very much, in for doing our first big project. And for me, this was certainly a step up on project scales that had done previously. So I was looking for support, and particularly, I found it more of a personal mentoring experience rather than sort of property focused, which I felt I had fairly well covered, but it was more the sort of challenges that come with, running your own business, how you deal with people, how you prioritize, what are the steps you need to kind of set the foundations on, to build upon.
That all makes sense. And so, obviously, you'd have your own portfolio in the background. You had your own sort of property, businesses in corporate form, or whatever. And this new property business that you're embarking upon was, a pretty significant joint venture. Like a 7-figure joint venture. And from what you've said, it sounds like you were really careful to deal with all the formalities as well. And actually, particularly when there's large sums of money involved and other people involved, like really squaring away all the detail, which is obviously that's the right approach. So that's kind of where you were. So talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges that you were dealing with at the time.
Yeah, so I mean, just back on your point there, certainly setting up the company was critical when you're doing it for yourself, and then when you're doing it with somebody else, you need to make sure that those align. And I was involved previously on a sort of JV that didn't quite work out as sort of planned, so I was a bit sort of burnt from that experience. I really wanted to set the stage properly before going out there and doing the business, which I think is definitely the way to do it. If not, it takes longer, but I think it does, put you in the right position, with the way everything was structured, and having all of our ducks in a row before we went out and bought the property, rather than go and buy the property and then sort everything out between myself and my business partner and anybody else.
Yeah.
And I think that was really important, to be able to deliver that.
I think that's just hovering over that. Like, I think that's just such an important message to to descend as well. And I love that expression, ducks in a row. Like one of my former kind of legal, one of the partners I worked for in law, that was his favorite expression is, Paul, let's get our ducks in a row before we do anything. I love that expression. But yeah, you're quite right. It's very exciting in property, in a new partnership, and there's, projects to be done and all the rest of it. It's very easy to get ahead of ourselves and not attend to like the detail and the formalities. But as you say, definitely the most important thing to do. Particularly, obviously, you've had a difficult experience, and you'll not be the only person in the world who's had that similar experience as well. So yeah, and so I suppose drilling into some of the detail of like what things were you kind of wrestling with that we sort of brought into the program with us?
So I think for me, it was bringing the right teams together, and being able to sort of prioritize and analyze, the people that we're working with, whether that's to do with, profiling people, and it was very interesting going through all of the, personal profiling. I found that quite helpful, not least for myself, but also, my business partner and other people we've brought into the mix, as contractors or consultants and things like that. And for me, the priority, whilst making a profit and getting a successful project is key, because we're just building out at the moment.
Yeah.
It was also very much a long-term game plan. So it's about setting those foundations, right in my own mind and within the business to build on that in the long term.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, a quick buck made and in and out and move on and go our separate ways. This is a 5, 10, 15-year business model, and it takes a bit longer to get going, but I think it then gives you the springboard to be able to bounce onto greater projects. And for me, that was really where I was coming from, wanting a little bit of hand holding, in terms of sort of more the personal aspect, as I say, the personal development side of things, that I was really looking for.
Absolutely. And I totally share those sentiments about the long game. Like property particularly is just a very, very long game. And I think that's definitely the right mindset to have with it, is get all the pieces of the puzzle on the table, organize them in the right way. It's particularly the people stuff, because often that's, quite one of the big challenges. Get the people stuff sorted out, as you say, a lot of that comes from self-awareness, as you've identified, like what are our own strengths and weaknesses, and how, and how is it best to communicate with different people and the rest of it. But you've got all the pieces on the table. You've got the project going ahead. I appreciate not every project goes to plan. If everything was easy, then of course everybody would be doing it. But tell us therefore, like, how did the program help? What kind of insights did you have during the course of the year, and what's the progress looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, a lot of the help is working with other people within the group who've all got their own experiences and knowledge base. And I found, talking some of the one-to-ones and things like that, very valuable to be able to, glean insight as to how different people handle different things and how they approach things. And so for me, that was very valuable throughout the year. The project has had its fair few trials and tribulations. We're hopefully at the back end of all of that now, and we're building out, and touch wood, it goes smoothly. And again, it was just about making sure that we did as much up front as possible. It's always that, laid on about it a little bit already, but it was making sure that the plans were absolutely right. So when they start building, hopefully, things aren't getting chopped and changed, and everybody was full in the knowledge as to what they were doing. And I think that's where it starts coming unstuck. And the thing that I've realized is everything's sort of all interconnected. And talking with some of the guys with builders or whatever, one thing has a knock-on effect to the next thing, has a knock-on effect to the next thing. And whilst we had issues with sort of planning process, which added some significant delays, and similarly with funding, given the market of late. That's given us the opportunity, hopefully, to get everything else sorted in the background. And we've been able to get rid of people within the team that we felt not quite operating correctly as well, rather than being able to be with your back up against the wall. And I gained a lot of comfort talking to people within the group, and yourself, Paul, about if it's not right, just make the decision and move on, and get rid of people. It's business at the end of the day, and it doesn't always work out with people. So for me, that was what was really important, was that networking and understanding other people and how they operate. And I know there's one or two other people in the group as well who have made some pretty big decisions as well along those lines, and it's about having that support network in the background.
Yeah, definitely. Having your own kind of group of people that you can share things in confidence and get everybody's ideas. And no doubt you ask like a handful of people, get a handful of different responses, but then you can process them yourself, can't you, and decide the way ahead. So in terms of the way ahead, like, what does the future look like, Josh?
Yeah, so we're looking for we've finally sorted out all of our funding, which was a headache. I think we won in a 10-year cycle, probably, if not longer. When it came to interest rate rises and lenders getting scared and all of this. So I think hopefully on our next project it'll be a little bit more straightforward. Having now borrowed a significant amount of money, we've obviously gone through the hoops, and it's about building that brand, and it's about building that dialogue with banks and people, and we've gone through that process now, so we can sort of rinse and repeat. And we've now also got very accurate idea on build costs and the design aesthetic that we want and everything like that. So come the second project, I'm not going to say it's plug and play, but we've done a lot of the groundwork, and again, that all took longer because we wanted to do it right, because we wanted to be able to build on it rather than just do it, get it out there, and then have to go through the process again. So that's been very, very interesting. And for us, our dream this year is to pick up a second project in this first quarter, hopefully this year, with a view of bringing that through and starting to build out towards the end of the year, and have completed the project that we're currently building out, and to have got that all rented out and refinanced, because we're planning on building a portfolio. If possible, we want to retain everything that we're building out to be able to build up a decent cash flow coming into the business, and to give us leverage going forwards in 5, 10, 15 years, when they've also had some capital appreciation. We feel, again, it's that long-term gain. Do you take the quick buck now, or do you take the hard-earned cash later on? And I think for us, it's about building wealth, and it's about building that cash cow in the future, more than it is about sort of cashing out quickly for a quick buck today.
Got it. That all makes sense. And I think you're right. You were raising vast sums of capital in a period of time which will be remembered, I think, as one of the most turbulent in UK economic history, where the UK bond market was almost collapsing because of not Theresa May, Liz Truss, and the various that mini budget that went out. But you not only survived it, you thrived it. And I would say if you can raise capital in that environment, everything else should be fairly plain sailing. But I'll touch wood before I finish that sentence.
100%. We'd like to think so, but so that for us is our game plan. This next year is to pick up a second, if not a third project towards the tail end of the year, because we want to build up that pipeline. We've got the bandwidth to be able to run 2 or 3 projects at any one time, subject to raising finance and things like that, which obviously is a topic that we've gone through on the inner circle as well. So that for me is going to be a big part of this year, is going out there, networking, building those contacts, getting that confidence within investors, to be able to be there when we actually need them. And personally, I think private investment at the moment, having had quite a bit of a headache with our institutional investments, I think is a good position to try and get into. I'm sure we'll need some institutional investment, but we want to be able to have that flexibility, and having people that we know that we can trust who will deliver, and likewise, that they know and can trust us and that we're going to deliver as well. And it's about building that brand, and having that sort of test project, as it were, saying, look, this is what we said we were going to do, this is what we've done, this is how we've done it, these are the outcomes, these are the learnings. We're in a much stronger position on our second, third, fourth, 10th project, to be able to deliver for investors and for ourselves.
Definitely. We know that there are lots of people around who have really substantial liquid pools of capital, and that obviously the priority A is return of capital and priority B is return on capital. And yeah, we know those people are there, and we know that they are looking to deploy capital in all environments, particularly where people are playing a long game as well. So as to the inner circle then, let's say somebody's on the fence, they're thinking about the inner circle and then looking to make a final decision on it, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's well worth participating. For me, there's been some great contacts built up with people, and I certainly hope that those will continue to grow and be nurtured. And the learning, with the various monthly sort of program, as it were, there's some really interesting bits in that, and it really definitely gets your thoughts whirling. And for me, I think that the big 2 or 3 were probably the learning for the day, in terms of planning and building that year goals. I think that was really important, and to be reviewing that. I sort of always did it mentally, but never necessarily put it all together in a personal business plan, not necessarily a business plan. And sometimes you've just got to realize they don't necessarily always tie together, and actually if you can get them to tie together, it makes life a lot easier. And for me, that was a really big learning point, and one of the key reasons I wanted to join. And then throughout the program, it was the various topics that we deep dived, whether that was personal, doing the personal reports and working out your personality types and all of that, and that of others, and also the raising finance, found quite helpful as well. And I'm sure I'll be deploying a lot of the tricks of the trade in there, and more personal branding, which I'm never hugely comfortable doing it, but I think I do think it's important to get that out there. And certainly from a business point of view, the front of Bright Hill is to be able to get that out there and show people what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Well, I think you're I personally think you're a natural at it. So we shall see this personal brand emerge over time. I've no doubt about it. So to bring the sort of podcast to a conclusion, is there anything you would like to add? And secondly, and equally importantly, what is the best way for people to contact you if they've heard what you've said, it's resonated with them, they're interested in kind of reaching out? What's the most convenient way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so they can get me at Joshua at bright-hill.co.uk, or just pop onto our website, which is bright-hill.co.uk, and that's got all of the contact information there. Very happy to have a chat with people. Got lots of experience in various different areas, and very happy to sort of help people where I can, but also people want to open up conversations, very interested in building that network, to sort of work with people in one form or another in the future, whether that's through giving finance or whether that's you're a contractor or whatever. I think it's invaluable. And when I look back at all the networking that I've done, for me, that's where I've had the biggest wins in my life, I think, is through meeting the right people, and then things start to happen.
Definitely, I would agree with all of that. Well, look, all that remains is for me to say thank you very much, Josh Jackson, for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you, and here to all of your continued success, obviously in 2023, but also beyond. So thank you very much, Josh.
Thank you very much, Paul.
And there you have it, everybody. So to discuss property investing, anything that we've discussed in this podcast, please do come to one of the next Property and Investor Breakfast. Links in the show notes. Subscribe, like, follow, comment on the podcast, and please connect with me on social media. My links are all below. Keep well, speak soon, and thank you very much for listening to the podcast.